Hey there, sleuths. Welcome to the Detective's Den, your one-stop spot for unpacking mysteries, cracking cases, and diving deep into the unknown. I'm your name, and I'll be your guide on this investigative journey. Globe showing Europe, Africa. Now tell me, from which corner of the globe are you tuning in today? Drop your location in the comments below. Let's see just how far our detective network reaches. Chapter 1. An urgent appeal. A persistent April rain washed the rooftops of Montmartre as the little taxi climbed the narrow, lantern-lit street. Inside, Hercule Poirot sat perfectly poised, his gleaming moustaches meticulously waxed, his posture as straight as a ramrod. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings peered through the fogged window, his bowler hat tipped back against the glass, umbrella at the ready. The night air smelled of damp stone and roasting chestnuts, and somewhere in the distance, an accordion rendered a plaintive note that drifted undecidedly through the mist. I had hoped for a tranquil evening at home, Hastings, Poirot murmured, turning his head only slightly, perhaps a cup of peppermint tea and the latest edition of Le Monde Illustre. But when Madame Bernard requests my presence, one finds oneself compelled by the most persuasive of obligations. Hastings chuckled. You've always preferred the cerebral excitement of a puzzle to the placid pleasures of solitude, Poirot. And tonight, it seems, you have a puzzle indeed. The taxi drew up before the Galerie de la Lune, its elegant facade bathed in the soft glow of gas lamps. A gilded sign swung gently in the breeze, proclaiming the gallery's name in ornate letters. Poirot paid the driver with calm deliberation, smoothing the lapels of his charcoal grey coat as he stepped onto the slick pavement. A single puddle reflected his small, precise shoes and the lanterns overhead. Inside, the gallery was a muted world of rich indigos and silvers. Tall walls draped in plush velvet bore paintings by celebrated artists, and dominating the rear wall was a vast antique tapestry, Le Songe de la Nuit, whose intricate silver threads glimmered like liquid moonlight. Yet the tapestry's beauty was marred by signs of violence. A crimson velvet boudoir chair lay overturned, splintered shards of glass littered the polished oak floor, and, most arresting of all, a solitary footprint, smaller than a man's boot, yet too large for a woman's slipper, marked the dust of an otherwise immaculate room. Poirot's keen grey eyes took in every detail. He knelt, brushing aside a shard of glass to study the footprint, then traced a finger along a faint smudge of charcoal dust at the tapestry's hem. Hastings hovered at his shoulder, notebook poised. Before Poirot could speak, a woman appeared at the gallery entrance, hurrying toward them. She was dressed in sober black, the height of Parisian elegance, but her face was pale, her voice trembling. "Inspector Poirot," she asked. "Thank God you have come." Poirot rose with alacrity, offering her his hand in a gesture of reassurance. "Madam, you have summoned me. Pray, tell me of your distress." The woman inhaled sharply, steadying herself. "I am Isabelle Bernard," she said. "My brother, Louis Bernard, owned this gallery. This evening, he invited 3 close friends to view this tapestry, Le Songe de la Nuit. He believed it concealed a secret of immense value. but when I returned from fetching refreshments, I discovered the salon in disarray and my brother lying motionless at the tapestry's edge. He is dead, and the police say it was robbery, yet Louis would never have endangered himself for mere profit. He feared someone would kill to keep the tapestry's secret hidden. Hastings exchanged a glance with Poirot. A tapestry concealing a secret map, and a robbery that ended in death, that was precisely the sort of caper to engage Poirot's little grey cells. "Madam," Poirot said gently, "let us proceed with calm method. Describe for me the events of this evening, step by step." Isabelle drew a trembling breath. "My brother sent out invitations at 5:30. At 6, Madame Simone Moreau arrived, an heiress and collector of rare antiquities. At 6:30, Monsieur Legendre, a gentleman of discreet reputation, some say attached to French intelligence, came to discuss the tapestry's provenance. And at 7, Clémence Renault, the young artist Louis has championed, joined them to offer her insight into the tapestry's motifs. They all viewed it with fascination, spoke of its age and the legend that it marked the location of a Roman ruin yet undiscovered. Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. And after that, a servant, Monsieur Dubois, brought refreshments at 7:45. They lingered only a few minutes. Then Louis asked them to return later when he could give them a private discussion. They left. I thought it odd, he had seemed so excited by his discovery. I stayed on to tidy the salon before closing. I sent Monsieur Dubois to fetch tea from the kitchen. But while he was gone, everything changed. She paused, tears welling. Hastings offered a handkerchief, and she accepted it gratefully. When the servant returned, the door was locked, she went on. He let himself in with his key. And there, the tapestry lay half unfurled, the chair overturned, glass shattered by its edge, and Louis, my beloved brother, collapsed where he had fallen. Poirot observed her steadily. "Madame Bernard, has the journal in which your brother recorded his findings been brought here?" She shook her head. "The journal lies in his study across the courtyard. He told me nothing of his discovery except to say it was of utmost importance. He said he feared that someone would kill to possess it." Poirot rose and turned to Hastings. "We must secure the scene and interview every soul who passed through that door. No one leaves. To Isabelle, Madame Bernard, you will remain in the office adjacent to this salon. Hastings and I will need access to your brother's study and the visitor ledger. But first, is this office available?" She led them through an oak archway into a smaller chamber. A broad mahogany desk, littered with papers and a leather-bound notebook, dominated the space. Framed sketches by Clémence Renault hung on one wall, and scattered letters bore Louis's neat cursive hand. A window looked out onto the courtyard below. Poirot inspected the desk, running a fingertip along a page of notes. No doubt the first clue to this mystery lies within these pages, and the one page Louis took with him, the page describing his secret. He turned to Isabelle. "Where did he keep the key to this office?" She tapped a silver key hanging on a hook. He never slept without it. Poirot pocketed the key. Excellent. Now, Hastings, escort Madame Bernard to her quarters and see that she remains there. Then obtain from Monsieur Dubois the visitor ledger, and bring it to me. I shall return to inspect the salon. Hastings bowed and assisted Isabelle from the room. Poirot closed the door softly, then retraced his steps to the salon. He paused to observe the footprint once more, then examined the lock on the heavy oak door. It showed no sign of tampering, nor did the windows reveal any forced entry. His lips curved ever so slightly, the classic locked room puzzle. Reaching the tapestry, Poirot traced the hem and gently lifted the silken edge. Beneath, a small ventilation grille lay concealed, the remnants of charcoal dust at its corners. He extracted a small cotton swab from his coat pocket and pressed it into the soot. Hastings was correct, he said to the empty room. This grille has been opened recently, and by someone agile enough to squeeze through. I must know what Monsieur Dubois's ledger reveals. He slid the swab into a protective glassine envelope. Lightning flickered outside, followed by a soft rumble of thunder. Poirot straightened his shoulders. The questions were many. Who had motive enough to kill? Which of the three visitors, or perhaps a fourth unseen presence, had knowledge of the tapestry's secret? And was this death the result of obsession, greed, or a darker obsession of the heart? As the rain beat a steady tattoo on the gallery's skylights, Poirot felt the familiar thrill of the chase. Somewhere among the echoes of glass breaking, in those silver-woven threads, lay the truth waiting patiently to be unraveled. And he, Hercule Poirot, would see it laid bare by the little grey cells that never, ever rested until justice was done. Chapter 2. The Tapestry's Shadow. A thin shaft of morning sunlight pierced the gallery's high windows, illuminating drifting motes of dust and the cool shimmer of La Songe de la Nuit's silver threads. Hercule Poirot returned with Captain Hastings in tow, prepared to probe every corner of the Galerie de la Lune. Outside, the rain had ceased, leaving the Montmartre streets slick and glittering. Within, the atmosphere crackled with the unspoken tension of violence visited upon beauty. Poirot paused in the threshold of the salon, eyes narrowing to their characteristic almond-slit intensity. The overturned chair still lay on its side, and the broken shards of what once protected the tapestry's reverse glinted like malignant stars scattered across the parquet. The single small footprint remained, hauntingly distinct. Beside it, Hastings knelt, sketching its outline in his notebook. "Ah, mon ami," Poirot said softly, "the footprint is unchanged since last night, yes?" Hastings nodded. "Precisely, Poirot. There's no doubt it belongs to a child or a petite woman, given the length and delicate curve. But none of the three adults who visited last evening match its size. Nor, so far as I know, does Monsieur Dubois, the servant." He rose and handed his sketch to Poirot. The detective studied it for a moment, then tucked the paper into his waistcoat pocket. "Very good. But let us not be misled by size alone. There are gloves that can alter prints, and shoes with soles custom made. We must cast our net wide. He moved to the heavy oak door, running a finger across its surface. Hastings observed him intently. Note, Hastings, that the grain here shows no recent gouges. This was a genuine lock, no forcing. And yet, our intruder appeared without bother. Poirot's lips curved slightly. An inside job, perhaps, or the assistance of a key, Monsieur Dubois's key, most likely. But more on that later. Poirot crossed to the tapestry's hem and crouched. He drew his magnifying glass from his inside pocket and examined the fringe. See here, n'est-ce pas? Tiny strands of fresh charcoal dust caught in the silver weave. Someone crawled through the grille last night, no doubt guided by darkened attire to conceal their approach. He tapped the grille thoughtfully. Our culprit knew the tapestry's secret lay inside. They risked crawling into this gallery, perhaps on hands and knees, to seize it. Hastings frowned. Yet when we lifted the tapestry, there was no sign that the map itself, if indeed it exists, was removed. The tapestry remains intact. He gestured to the mosaic of silver threads, still glimmering. Poirot nodded. All the more curious. If the map was the prize, why leave it behind? Unless the intruder was startled, interrupted in the act. No sign of struggle near the tapestry, Hastings pointed out. Only that overturned chair. But the glass fracturing suggests haste. Poirot rose gracefully. We shall interview our suspects once more, Hastings, this time aided by fresh observations. But first, I wish to inspect the gardener's shed, where our charcoal dust may originate, and the service entrance through which Monsieur Dubois passed. Every path must be traced. Outside, the gallery's courtyard lay cloaked in dappled shade. A modest flower bed hugged the gallery wall, and beyond it stood a small timber shed painted forest green. Hastings led the way, coat collar turned up against the lingering dampness. The shed door creaked as they entered. Inside, sacks of potting soil lined one wall, gardening tools hung neatly on the other. Near the corner, a small pile of used charcoal briquettes sat half buried in sawdust. Poirot approached, peering down. Ah, charcoal indeed, but not of the highest grade. Common drawing charcoal, yes? He broke off a fragment and compared it to the dust in his vial. Identical composition. Which suggests our intruder made use of this very material. Hastings looked up. The gardener is M. Fournier. He works evenings here, tends the jasmine and roses. He must have forgotten to secure the shed last night. Poirot replaced the fragment. Or he was complicit. We must question him, but not yet. Next, the service entrance. Show me, Hastings. They proceeded to a narrow door in a side alley, clearly marked, personnel only. Hastings unlocked it with the key provided by Madame Bernard, the same key used by Monsieur Dubois. Inside, the gallery's back corridors spread like arteries, leading to the office, the cloakroom, the kitchen beyond. Poirot's gaze took in every signpost. Note the worn patch here, Hastings, where foot traffic compresses the matting. And here, a scuff on the door frame, a boot heel scraped the paint. The servant footmark. Hastings knelt to examine it. You're right. It matches Monsieur Dubois's size and the pattern of his boots exactly. Small heel, rounded front. He unrolled a small plaster cast they'd made of the servant's boot. But our intruder's print remains by the tapestry, smaller still. Precisely. Poirot nodded. 2 sets of footmarks, 2 participants perhaps, the servant and another, smaller. The smaller one ventures through the grille, guided by the stronger pair. A collaboration. They retraced their steps to the front of the gallery, hearts quickening with each piece of the puzzle falling into place. Poirot paused on the threshold of the salon, hand on the door frame. Hastings, you shall interview Monsieur Dubois, under the pretense of routine inquiries, while I secure Madame Moreau. He indicated the visitor ledger, which lay open on a nearby pedestal. We must draw out their emotions. Jealousy, fear, greed, drives men and women to extraordinary lengths. Hastings saluted and set off to summon the servant from his quarters. Poirot, meanwhile, strolled into the gallery proper, only to find a figure already at the foot of the tapestry, Madame Moreau herself, demurely wrapped in a sab. Perhaps you can explain why, at precisely 7:30 last night, Monsieur Dubois stole despite the warm morning. Madame, Poirot greeted, inclining his head, I trust you slept well. She startled, dropping a glove onto the floor. Inspector. I could not rest. I returned to my carriage early, but something drew me back. She lifted her chin defiantly. I came to see the tapestry once more, and to speak with you. Poirot's eyes fixed upon her. Then saw you lingering near the service entrance, clipboard in hand, though no art business required your attention then. She stiffened. I came to verify the tapestry's lighting for an evening event I might host here. It was purely professional. Professional. Poirot echoed. Yet your advertisement in this morning's Le Petit Journal seems rather personal, an evening among treasures. Private viewing of Le Songe de la Nuit by Madame Moreau. He allowed the words to linger like a taunt. Madame Moreau's composure wavered. She took a trembling step back. I planned an event. But I left early, before 9. Indeed. But you returned, Poirot pressed. To what end? She turned away, smoothing the fur trim of her stole. I feared something was amiss. Louis was to open the gallery on the morrow for a special transaction. He mentioned a buyer of great discretion. I thought, perhaps it concerned me. I did not intend harm. Her voice cracked, betraying panic. Poirot watched her carefully. You left your carriage at 9. At 10, you were seen near the service entrance, although your presence is unrecorded in the ledger. Between 10 and 10:30, you could have slipped through the back corridors unseen, especially with Monsieur Dubois's key. And yet, you claim no knowledge of the broken glass or the footprint. She shivered. "I swear, Inspector, I found the salon just as you did, overturned chair, broken glass, Louis, dead." Her hands clenched. "I loved Louis, truly. But I would never harm him. He refused to give me the tapestry's map, saying it belonged to the gallery. I begged him for a copy. He refused." Poirot inclined his head. "He said the map was his alone to share. Yet you believed it yours by right." He paused, then softened his tone. "Madam, you must understand, jealousy is a potent motive. And desperation can drive us to rash deeds." Madame Moreau's lips trembled, but she said nothing more. Poirot studied her for a long moment, then turned deliberately toward the gilded tapestry. "Hastings," he called softly, and the captain reappeared, blinking at the overhead light. "Send for Monsieur Dubois. And tell Clémence Renault I wish to speak with her next." As Hastings hurried away, Poirot returned to the tapestry's edge, running his finger gently across the dusty footmark. Two footprints at two moments, two intruders working in concert, or two facets of the same conspiracy. The tapestry's silvery threads held a secret that had tempted love, ambition, and perhaps murder itself. High above, a single pane of glass trembled in its sash, as though echoing the fragile boundary between art and atrocity. And in that gallery of shadows, Poirot felt the first stirrings of a master design, one he would unravel thread by thread, until the truth lay bare in the cold morning light. Chapter 3. Locked doors and hidden passages. A grey London sky would have been more customary for intrigue, but in April, Paris offered a clear, pale dawn as Poirot and Hastings reconvened in the Galerie de la Lune. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, illuminating motes of dust that drifted lazily amid the silver threads of Le Songe de la Nuit. Yet for Poirot, even the brightest day could not dispel the shadows of suspicion that clung to every corner of the gallery. First, Poirot declared, "We must speak again with Monsieur Dubois." He turned to Hastings. "Fetch him from the servants' quarters, and do so with haste but discretion. I wish to observe his reaction in the same salon where the crime occurred." Hastings nodded and slipped out. Poirot used the pause to examine the oak door's lock once more. His gloved fingertips felt no sign of tampering, but when he tapped the door frame, a sharp metallic echo spoke of an internal mechanism. "Curious," he murmured. "A lock so sturdy, yet yielding to a master key. We must see the key's imprint." Hastings soon returned, leading a dejected Monsieur Dubois, a young man with anxious eyes and coal-dusted fingernails. Poirot motioned him toward the overturned chair. "Monsieur Dubois, you let no one into this salon after 9 o'clock." His tone was gentle but firm. "Non, monsieur," Dubois stammered. "I brought the tea at 7:45, then tidied the side corridor until close to midnight. I did not return here until the gardener found Monsieur Bernard." He wrung his hands. "I swear I have only my duties to account for." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Yet your boot scuffed the matting in the service corridor, yes? That scuff matches your boot heel precisely." He indicated the cast Hastings had made the previous night. And you had the key to this door. Poirot held up Dubois's servant key. This key fits the lock, n'est-ce pas? Dubois nodded miserably. Yes, monsieur. But I would never use it at night. I lock up and go home. He looked down at the scarlet stain on his cuff. The charcoal dust, monsieur, from the shed. I forgot to clean it off after tending the roses. Poirot leaned forward, peering at the dust on Dubois's cuff. Charcoal for concealment, perhaps. Yet you say the shed was unlocked when you found it this morning. Dubois hesitated. Yes. I left it open by mistake. But I swear I neither crawled through that grille nor touched the tapestry. Poirot smiled thinly. Then you left no other key in idle hands. He turned to Hastings. We shall return to Monsieur Dubois presently. For now, let us visit Monsieur Legendre. Leaving the servant to his relief at freedom, Poirot and Hastings made their way to a small back parlour, where Philippe Legendre sat behind a low desk strewn with official-looking documents. He looked every inch the polished gentleman, tailored suit, discreet cufflinks, a perfect tie knot. Monsieur Legendre, Poirot began, you claim to have business in the Quai d'Orsay after leaving here last night. Yet the concierge reports you returned to your apartment on the Rue de l'Université at 10:30. Legendre's composed facade showed the faintest flicker of surprise. Inspector, he replied smoothly, I had urgent papers to sign for the ministry. I did not anticipate being questioned so soon. He leaned back, appraising Poirot with cool detachment. But any gentleman may have such errands. True, Poirot conceded. Yet your government work could explain in trance to certain restricted archives. Did those errands relate to Roman antiquities, perchance? He watched Legendre closely. Legendre's eyes narrowed. You listen too closely to gossip, Inspector. I know nothing of Le Songe de la Nuit beyond Monsieur Bernard's invitation. I left promptly when he dismissed us. Poirot inclined his head. Then you did not return to this gallery later, through the vent or service corridor, to recover the tapestry's secret. Legendre's jaw clenched imperceptibly. I repeat, I did not. Poirot let the silence linger. Very well, monsieur. Yet your alibi is uncorroborated. I recommend you remain at my disposal. With a formal nod, Poirot took his leave. Once outside, he turned to Hastings. Suspicion remains on Legendre, though he is practiced at concealment. Now, to Clémence Renault, that dear ingénue. Clémence's studio was a bright loft 2 blocks away, its windows overlooking the rooftops of Montmartre. Canvases leaned against walls, and oil paints lay half-used on a table. She greeted them wrapped in a paint-stained smock, cheeks flushed from a late-night session. Inspector Poirot, she exclaimed. You startled me. I thought I would find only my easel here. Her smile faded when she saw Hastings's note of severity. Is everything all right? I I returned here after the tragedy to work through my grief. My sketches of Songe. I kept them in my satchel. Poirot studied her gently. Mademoiselle, your passion for art is evident. But tell me, you said you sketched copies of the tapestry from Monsieur Bernard's catalogue. Did you ever notice any underdrawing, perhaps an outline beneath the silver threads? Clémence's violet eyes widened. Under? I did not think to look. But when Monsieur Bernard first revealed the tapestry's secret, he unrolled it on the table. I glimpsed faint lines, a map of ruins, I believe. She shivered. I thought it part of the legend. A fanciful addition, not worth theft. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Yet you alone among our guests knew precisely where those lines were, how to expose them. Is it not so? Clémence's lips trembled. She shook her head. No, Inspector. I loved Louis, he believed in my talent. Yes, I saw the map, but I would never harm him. He asked me to refine the sketches, that was all. Poirot inclined his head thoughtfully. Still, you returned here to grieve, and you passed through the service corridor, no doubt with Monsieur Dubois's key. You could access the grille, roll back the tapestry, and copy the map at leisure. Clémence's shoulders hunched. No. I only came to paint a portrait of him, posthumously. She bit her lip. He wanted me to work on an illuminated version for a patron. I loved him too much to hurt him. Poirot's lips curved. Love, once more, and grief, powerful motives, mademoiselle. Yet motive alone does not suffice. We must find proof. He turned to Hastings. My friend, we have spoken to each suspect. Each had opportunity. Each had motive, some more plausible than others. But one clue remains unexamined, the remains of that shattered glass. He led them back to the salon, where the broken fragments lay still glittering. We shall analyze the shards for fingerprints or traces of ink. And we shall study the grille's hinge for indications of frequent use, perhaps tool marks or rust patterns. Poirot's eyes gleamed with determination. The secret of Songe hides behind the silver threads. But before we reveal it, we must trace every pathway, test every alibi. One of our three, Moreau, Legendre, or Renault, will fracture under the weight of evidence. As the morning stretched on, Hastings surveyed the gallery with fresh eyes. The overturned chair, the small footprint, the charcoal dust, the servant's key, and the three alibis formed an intricate web. Poirot's slender fingers flicked a shard of glass into a white envelope. Each shard, a witness, he murmured. Each thread, a clue. We shall soon unweave the tapestry's darkness. Outside, Montmartre stirred to life, vendors arranged their stalls, street musicians tuned their instruments, and the sun climbed higher, banishing the final mists of dawn. But within the Galerie de la Lune, a deeper awakening had begun, the unraveling of a crime as artful and precise as the tapestry itself. An Hercule Poirot, guardian of order, prepared to restore harmony by exposing the murderer among them. Chapter 4. A portrait of the patrons. The soft glow of late afternoon light filtered through the lofty windows of the Galerie de la Lune, dispersing a kaleidoscope of motes across the polished oak floor. The great tapestry Le Songe de la Nuit dominated the far wall, its silver threads gleaming despite the chaos that raged around it. Hercule Poirot stood before it, his posture impeccably straight, his keen grey eyes flicking from one suspect to another as they waited in uneasy silence. Three figures occupied the salon: Madame Simone Moreau, the elegant collector, Clémence Renault, the impassioned young artist, and Monsieur Legendre, the discreet gentleman of mysterious affiliations. Each bore an air of refinement, yet each also carried the tension of guilt, or fear, waiting to be probed. Poirot cleared his throat softly. Madame Moreau, Mademoiselle Renault, Monsieur Legendre, he began, his voice calm but insistent, I thank you all for returning at my request. To reach the truth of Louis Bernard's unfortunate demise, we must explore not only what each of you did, but also why. Permit me, then, to sketch your portraits in turn, that we may discern the motive behind the crime. He turned first to the woman seated in a carved mahogany chair, her navy blue suit tailored to perfection. A single strand of pearls lay against her throat like a line of luminous dewdrops. Madame Simone Moreau, he said, you are renowned for your exquisite taste and considerable means. Yet I am informed that your family's fortune suffered significant losses last year, losses you hope to recoup through strategic acquisitions. A map to an undiscovered Roman ruin could transform any collection, or any bank account. Madame Moreau's pale blue eyes flickered, but she remained composed. Inspector, she replied, voice cool, my father's affairs are his own. My interest in Le Songe de la Nuit was purely artistic. One never places all one's hopes upon a single investment. Poirot inclined his head. Of course. And yet you pressed Louis Bernard fervently for a copy of the map he discovered woven into the tapestry's reverse. You promised a private exhibition in your own salon, an event that might attract both acclaim and profit. When he demurred, you returned here after closing time. How does one explain this persistence, this intrusion? Madame Moreau's lips tightened. I confess I came back to ensure the tapestry's safety. I feared thieves, less refined than my circle, might steal what I could not possess. She paused, then added with a resigned sigh, I would not harm Louis. He was a gracious host and a dear friend. Poirot's gaze remained steady. Fear can drive one to rash acts. And jealousy, too, can render one reckless. But I thank you for your candor, madam. I shall hold it in mind. Turning, Poirot's eyes softened as they settled on Clémence Renault, who stood by a small side table, her hands clasped tightly before her. The paint splatters on her smock testified to her devotion to her art, and perhaps to her subject. Mademoiselle Renault, Poirot said, voice warm yet unwavering, you have spoken of your deep affection and admiration for Louis Bernard. He believed in your talent when few did. Yet you also confessed to sketching an outline of the hidden map for the gallery's catalogue, a sketch you later destroyed out of fear. Clémence's violet eyes brimmed with tears. Yes, Inspector. I never intended to betray him. My sketches were my way of assisting, of repaying his kindness. When he refused to credit me properly, my wounded pride drove me to destroy the evidence. I feared my name would overshadow his. Poirot nodded, as though each word shaped a new facet of her character. Wounded pride is a potent emotion. You returned here last night at 10 o'clock, unrecorded in the visitor ledger but betrayed by a small footprint at the tapestry's hem, footwear fitting only a slim woman. You could have crawled through the grille, which Monsieur Dubois left ajar, to glimpse the map yourself. Clémence's lips quivered. I was there only to paint a portrait of him, honoring his final discovery. I left when I saw the shattered glass and his body. I was too distraught to stay. Please believe that I did not intend harm. Poirot regarded her for a long moment, then offered a gentle nod. Your sorrow rings true, mademoiselle, yet sorrow alone does not preclude guilt. We shall see. His final gaze fell upon Monsieur Legendre, who sat erect in a small cushion-backed chair, expression unreadable. Legendre's tailored suit and discreet cufflinks spoke of a man accustomed to quiet power. Monsieur Legendre, Poirot began, his tone shifting to one of respectful gravity, you claimed government business at the Quai d'Orsay after our viewing. Yet the concierge observed your return to the Rue de l'Université at 10:30, precisely when the Songe secret lay exposed to any daring enough to enter. Legendre's eyes narrowed fractionally. Inspector, my duties are confidential. I cannot divulge matters of state. Suffice it to say that my errands were urgent and legitimate. Poirot inclined his head. Naturally. And yet your connection to the Société des Antiquaires de France suggests a keen interest in Roman relics, and perhaps archives inaccessible to most. You had the means to orchestrate discreet entry, to use keys and knowledge of hidden passages. You might have directed Monsieur Dubois to leave the service grille unlatched, facilitating a second visitor. Legendre's composure wavered ever so slightly before he recovered. You have no proof, only speculation. He paused, then asked quietly, what do you believe, Inspector? Poirot pressed a gloved finger to his lips. First, we must assemble the facts. Each of you had motive, opportunity, and means. Madame Moreau, you feared lost fortunes. Mademoiselle Renault, you nursed wounded pride. Monsieur Legendre, you balanced secrets of state with the promise of a ruin's discovery. But motive alone does not convict. He took a small silk handkerchief from his pocket and unfolded it. Observe this tiny thread, caught in the tapestry's fringe. He held it up in the lamplight. Not part of the original weave. It bears a faint trace of indigo pigment, the very shade found on Mademoiselle Renault's brushes. He then produced a single pearl clasp from Madame Moreau's bracelet, found among the shards of glass on the floor. And this, a pearl matching your necklace, Madame, found near the overturned chair where Louis collapsed. Madame Moreau's composure cracked, and Clémence gasped. Legendre's eyes widened in surprise. Poirot folded the evidence away and turned to face them. "These finds show that two of you touched the tapestry directly, one to pry it open, the other perhaps to strike in anger or panic. But the final piece of the puzzle comes from the service corridor, a scrap of official stationery, stamped with the emblem of the Quai d'Orsay. Monsieur Legendre, your errands were not merely administrative, they brought you here after dark." Legendre rose abruptly. "You twist coincidences into conspiracies," he protested. "I was here, admittedly, when the corridors were quiet. But only to verify the timeline of Louis's final movements." Poirot raised a gloved hand. "And yet you remained unrecorded in the ledger, as did Mademoiselle Renault. Madame Moreau, you snuck back to retrieve what you believed rightfully yours. Each of you played a part in this tragedy, but only one dealt the mortal blow." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The three suspects shifted uneasily, exchanging glances fraught with fear and uncertainty. "Tomorrow," Poirot concluded, "we will reveal the truth. For tonight, reflect on your actions, the trembling hands that snatched at silver threads, the footsteps that echoed softly through hidden passages, the hearts that pulsed with greed, pride, or patriotic fervor. The tapestry's secret may be ancient, but the motives that bind us betray us all too readily." As the salon lights dimmed and the suspects were escorted away, Poirot lingered before Songe de la Nuit, his little grey cells humming with anticipation. Each portrait he had sketched bore the subtle stain of intention, now to see which one painted the face of guilt. The tapestry's silent threads awaited the final unraveling, and he, Hercule Poirot, would be the master who set them free. Chapter 5. Threads of Evidence. Morning light filtered through the high windows of the Galerie de la Lune, scattering pale squares across the polished oak floor. The great tapestry Songe de la Nuit hung undisturbed, its silver threads gleaming with a spectral radiance. Yet around it lay the detritus of violence, shards of protective glass, a single diminutive footprint in dust, and the faint smears of charcoal. In the hush of the gallery, Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings prepared to follow each thread of evidence to its ultimate end. Poirot knelt beside the broken fragments of the glass pane that once protected the tapestry's reverse. With his gloved fingers he selected the smallest sliver, holding it up between thumb and forefinger. "Observe, Hastings," he murmured, "the edge of this shard is not jagged as one would expect from a violent blow, but cleanly cut, indicating the use of a sharp instrument. Our intruder did not batter the pane, but slit it swiftly to gain access." Hastings peered over Poirot's shoulder. A surgical incision, so to speak, rather than brute force. "Exactment," Poirot agreed. "The method betrays a mind that prizes efficiency. Yet the cut also required time and concentration, time during which the murderer risked detection. A bold individual, indeed." He rose and moved to the tapestry's foot, where the single footprint crouched in charcoal-dusted dust. Hastings took a photograph, while Poirot examined its contours. "Size 6, perhaps," he observed, tapping the sole with a fingertip. "Delicately soled, likely custom-made to muffle sound on hardwood floors. No ordinary shoe." I measured the length at 23 centimeters, Hastings reported. Too small for a man the size of Du Bois or Legendre, not small enough for a child. Perhaps a petite woman. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Or a man with slender feet, and a willingness to wear another's shoe for concealment. Yet no suspect admitted to such footwear. We shall return to this. He stepped back to the tapestry's hem, where the charcoal-dusted fabric beckoned. From his pocket he withdrew a small white swab, pressing it into the dust. Our intruder crawled through that grille, he said, pointing to the concealed ventilation opening behind the tapestry's folds, and bore charcoal from the gardener's shed upon their clothing. But note, this is not pure charcoal dust. There is a fine metallic grit within it. Now, where have we seen metal dust in connection with this crime? Hastings frowned. The metallic mordant used to preserve the tapestry's map, applied by the restoration workshop on Rue de Sillery. Perhaps they share a common source. Precisely, Poirot said, tucking the swab into an envelope. Our intruder carried both charcoal and metal dust. Whoever entered did so not merely to steal a map, but to handle the tapestry itself, bearing the metallic solution that seals the threads. And thus, their clothing became a vector of incrimination. He moved to a small basin of water by the window and dipped the swab in. The clear liquid turned a faint silvery sheen. See? Metallic particles suspended, proof that our culprit wore the tapestry's own preservation treatment. Hastings whistled softly. So the murderer not only cut the pane and crawled through the grille, but actually handled the tapestry at close quarters. Exactly. And now, Poirot continued, consider the indigo thread I retrieved from the far corner of the tableau. He produced a tiny scrap of cloth. This thread bears a trace of the same metallic preservation, yet it is dyed in a pigment matching Mademoiselle Renault's characteristic ultramarine. When I tested it, the water adopted the faintest indigo tinge, confirming its origin. Which ties Clémence Renault directly to the tapestry's handling, Hastings concluded. But does not yet prove she struck the fatal blow, Poirot cautioned. We must still account for motive and opportunity. Yet the physical evidence establishes who brushed against the threads. He rose, gloved hand gliding along the tapestry's surface, as though coaxing the fabric to reveal its secrets. Now let us step back and reconstruct the sequence. First, the killer arrives with the key. Only Du Bois's key fits the lock. They unlock the door, enter the service corridor, and approach the grille. They remove the protective pane with a blade, drop the shards upon the floor to simulate violence. Poirot outlined the positions with a finger. Next, the smaller accomplice, wearing charcoal-dusted garments, crawls through the grille to reach the tapestry. They pluck the corner of the weave, and a metallic-infused thread clings to their sleeve. Meanwhile, the larger accomplice remains on watch, perhaps stirring dust to obscure prints. Hastings traced the pattern on the floor. Then, startled by a noise, perhaps Louis returning, they panic, leave the tapestry untouched, and flee back through the grille. The larger accomplice relocks the door, and both depart, leaving only the shattered pane and their single footprint as feeble diversions. Poirot nodded. A sound reconstruction. But note, Louis Bernard was found slumped against the tapestry, not sprawled upon the floor. His final moments took place after the intruders fled. He must have returned to examine the broken pane, perhaps expecting an attempted theft, and collapsed of his wound or shock. Hastings frowned. Yet no wound was found, other than a bruise on his temple. Could the fall have proved fatal? A blow from the pane's frame, Poirot mused. But we shall defer autopsy details to the coroner. Our task is the identity of the intruders. He moved to the gallery door, examining the lock once more. Let us now confirm our suspects' alibis. First, the servant, Dubois, acknowledges leaving the shed open. He has charcoal on his nails, yet no metallic dust, save what he picked up fresh this morning. Investigation of his evening movements will determine if he participated voluntarily or unwittingly. Hastings scribbled notes. Second, Clémence Renault, the indigo thread and metallic tint tie her to direct tapestry contact. She returned here last night, unobserved, and could have donned charcoal to disguise her prints. Third, Madame Moreau, Poirot added, whose pearl clasp was found among the glass shards. She touched the tapestry too, though to what end? And finally, Monsieur Legendre, whose metallic savvy atelier supplies the preservation process. He had the motive of state secrets and the means to access keys and corridors. He paused, eyes closing in concentration. But only two persons could have maneuvered through that narrow grille together. One to hold the pane, the other to reach inside. Who among our suspects might enlist an accomplice of different stature? Hastings tapped the ledger. Madame Moreau has a niece, perhaps. Clémence, no. Legendre, unlikely to be accompanied. Poirot's lips curved in a small smile. Precisely. We must investigate the personal connections of each. Yet the mounting physical evidence points most strongly to the young artist and the elegant collector. He pocketed his swab and scrap of thread. Now, Hastings, dispatch for the coroner's full report on the nature of Louis's wound. I shall pay a visit to the Rue de Ciel atelier this afternoon to question the craftsman about his security protocols. If our intruder is complicit with the atelier, we may corner our quarry yet. As Hastings hurried away, Poirot returned to the tapestry, fingertips hovering above the silver sheen. Poor Louis Bernard, he whispered. He unveiled a secret that cost him his life. Yet his tapestry speaks still, in threads of dust, shreds of glass, and colored fragments. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall listen until the whole tale is told. Outside, the bustle of Montmartre continued unabated, but within the Galerie de la Lune each silent clue glimmered in the morning light, waiting patiently for the detective's little grey cells to weave them into the truth. Chapter 6. The Masterstroke. Late that afternoon, the three principal suspects, Madame Simone Moreau, Clémence Renault, and Monsieur Philippe Legendre, were each summoned to the Galerie de la Lune. The gas lamps had been lit to full brightness, their warm glow chasing away the last pale rays of daylight. Shadows clung to the corners of the salon, but at its center stood Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed, his little grey cells alight with the certainty of revelation. Captain Hastings stood at his side, holding a finely crafted wooden scale model of the gallery, complete with vaulted ceiling, oil lamps, the service corridor, and the concealed ventilation grille behind the tapestry. Poirot faced the three guests with calm dignity. "Miss Amis," he began, his voice measured, "you each believed you could possess Louis Bernard's secret map without detection. Yet not one among you counted on the tapestry itself betraying you." He gestured to the scale model. "Permit me to demonstrate the precise sequence of events as deduced from the physical evidence." He placed two miniature figures in the model's service corridor and moved them toward the grille. First, the accomplice of smaller stature, footwear crafted to leave a petite print, slipped through this aperture. Next, the taller accomplice, standing here, wielded a razor-sharp blade to score the protective pane behind the tapestry, then removed it with such precision that the resulting slivers remained neat rather than jagged. The broken fragments fell in a controlled fan across the floor, simulating a struggle. Poirot raised a gloved hand as if conducting an invisible orchestra. Meanwhile, the smaller intruder pressed forward, hand extended, brushing lightly against the tapestry's edge to extract the map concealed within its silver threads. Upon contact, a metallic mordant, applied during the tapestry's recent restoration, adhered to the intruder's sleeve. Then, in a moment of panic, both fled through the grille, leaving behind only these calculated clues. He nodded toward the suspects. "Let me show you how each morsel of evidence points unerringly to its origin." He stepped to a low pedestal upon which lay a small pile of glass shards. E.g., Poirot plucked up a slender fragment. Examination under magnification revealed that these shards bear microscopic striations consistent with a fine-bladed instrument, not a thrown rock. Such artistry with a blade suggests familiarity with delicate materials, an expertise belonging either to a meticulous art conservator or a seasoned collector accustomed to handling priceless antiquities. Madame Moreau's face paled. She lifted a gloved hand to her mouth but said nothing. Poirot laid the shard aside and retrieved a single footprint cast from the salon floor. Next, the footprint. Made in fine charcoal dust from the gardener's shed, but shaped by a specially constructed shoe of size 6, far too petite for Monsieur Dubois, too diminutive even for the average woman. Yet the sole's pattern matches a bespoke design commissioned this spring by Mademoiselle Clémence Renault, according to her own supplier. "Are you surprised, Mademoiselle?" He offered her the cast. Clémence Renault's hands trembled. I only ordered them to test different grip surfaces for my rooftop sketches," she stammered. "I never wore them here." Poirot murmured. "But they were worn here, seen under the cloak of charcoal dust. And still, monsieur, you remain silent on your own size 6 footwear." He turned to Monsieur Legendre. "Monsieur, do you deny instructing a local cobbler to create exactly that sole pattern for someone under your patronage?" Legendre's face flickered with annoyance. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Poirot stepped back to the table. "Let us continue." He lifted a small glassine envelope. "Here, charcoal dust mixed with metallic residue. The gardener's shed, yes, but also the workshop where Monsieur Legendre maintains a secret restoration atelier. The same workshop that produced the metallic mordant used to seal the tapestry's hidden map. A perfect chemical match." He tapped the envelope gently. "This proves that our intruder not only scooped up charcoal for disguise but also bore metal particles from that atelier." Madame Moreau's lips quivered, but she remained seated, white-knuckled upon her chair's armrests. Poirot drew forth the tiniest scrap of thread he had recovered from the tapestry's hem. It gleamed with silver flecks and deep indigo dye. "Observe this fragment, ultramarine pigment matching precisely the hue of Mademoiselle Renault's favorite paint, her signature color for which she once paid a premium. A pigment so rare that only a select few suppliers carry it in Paris. Mademoiselle, you have used this pigment." He allowed the scrap to dangle between his fingers before laying it upon a white cloth. "And yet you deny having handled the tapestry itself." Clémence's eyes filled, but she did not deny it. Poirot then held aloft a single pearl clasp. "And this, a pearl clasp, snapped from a necklace purchased exclusively by Madame Moreau. It was found amid the glass shards at the scene." He rotated the pearl in his hand, letting the light catch its luster. "Your necklace was altered last week, madam, so that the clasp fit more snugly, according to the jeweler's invoice. No one else possesses such a clasp." Simone Moreau crumpled forward, suddenly weeping. Clémence turned away, face pale. Legendre's expression hardened into righteous indignation. Poirot raised both hands for silence. But physical evidence alone cannot convict without motive. Why, among the three of you, was the map so urgently desired? Monsieur Legendre? You claim patriotic duty to preserve French antiquities, and yet you secretly collect Roman relics by private purchase. Mademoiselle Renault, you admit you sketched the map for artistic purposes but then destroyed your drawings out of fear. Yet facts remain, you sketched the map and you handled the tapestry. Madame Moreau, with your considerable financial concerns and prestige to maintain, you stand to profit most. A lost Roman ruin would bring you fame and funds beyond measure." He paused, the gaslights flickering as though in agreement. "Which one of you dealt the fatal blow?" "Ah, yes, the blow which felled Louis Bernard." Poirot swept a hand toward the tapestry. He returned to examine the broken pane after the intruders fled, perhaps to see if anything had been taken. In his distraction, he leaned too close, stumbled upon the loose shards, struck his temple, and collapsed. No murderer struck him directly. Instead, his curiosity proved fatal. Legendre exclaimed, "You cannot say that with certainty." Poirot inclined his head. "The coroner's report confirms a depressed skull fracture, consistent with a fall from standing height against a glass edge. The lack of defensive wounds supports this. Louis died in the gallery, struck unintentionally by the pane he believed had been shattered by a bungled robbery." He turned back to the suspects. Now, Madame Moreau, would you care to explain how your pearl clasp and your ink-stained footprints came to be here, in the gallery of a man you claim to have loved?" Simone Moreau's shoulders shook, and she found her voice. I followed him to beg him to share the map with me privately. I feared bankruptcy if I lost my family's estate. I did not mean harm. But when I saw the broken pane, I panicked. I thought someone had attacked Louis for what he knew. I fumbled the clasp. I tried to slip away unseen. In my haste, I dropped the pearl, smudged my gloves with glass, and fled through the grille, convinced a robber lurked inside. Poirot's eyes softened just slightly. Fear, like greed, shapes our actions. You meant only to retrieve what you believed was yours. Yet you left behind the crumbs that identify you unmistakably. He turned to Clémence. Mademoiselle Renault, you courageously returned to the gallery in the night to paint a portrait from memory, or so you claimed. Yet your indigo thread and your unique footprints betray you. Clémence lowered her gaze. I wanted only to honor him. I swear I never intended to steal the map. Poirot nodded. Intent and impact differ. You trespassed, you handled the tapestry, but you did not set in motion the events that led to Louis's fatal injury. Finally, he faced Legendre. And you, Monsieur, guardian of antiquities. You have the means to orchestrate both access and escape, yet the evidence of shoe pattern, atelier dust, and key signature absolves you of direct involvement. Your government errands at the Quai d'Orsay were legitimate. Legendre exhaled, tension draining from his posture. Poirot motioned to Hastings. Captain, please inform Inspector Dupont that this matter is concluded. We have our culprit. Hastings bowed and departed to fetch the local inspector. Madame Moreau sat, weeping quietly. Clémence placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Legendre awaited further instruction with an air of relief. Poirot returned to the tapestry, staring at its silver sheen as though seeking comfort in its silent steadfastness. And so, he whispered to Hastings when the room was empty of police, the map's masterstroke of deception proved no match for the masterstroke of detection. Each stray thread, each speck of dust, each broken shard converged to weave the tapestry of truth. In the fading glow of the gallery lamps, Le Songe de la Nuit retained its beauty, and its secret had been laid bare. Yet, as Poirot knew, the greatest art lies not only in the creation of such a masterpiece, but in unraveling its mysteries to bring order out of chaos. Chapter 7. The Unraveling. A hush had settled over the Galerie de la Lune by the following evening, as if the very walls waited with bated breath. The lamps glowed softly, their light dancing upon the silver threads of Le Songe de la Nuit. Hercule Poirot stood before the tapestry, flanked by Captain Hastings and Inspector Dupont, awaiting the arrival of the final participant in this drama, Clémence Renault's mentor, the archaeologist Dr. Marcel Fournier. It was he who would translate the map's hidden lines into a journey of discovery, if indeed the map was genuine. But first, Poirot intended to complete the tapestry of truth. Moments later, Dr. Fournier entered, his tweed jacket still dusted with earth from his latest dig. He inclined his head respectfully to Poirot. "Monsieur, I understand you wished to see the map in its original form before the Louvre claims it." "Exactement, Doctor," Poirot replied, steepling his fingers. "Before we entrust Le Songe de la Nuit and its secrets to posterity, we must be certain that every twist of fate and turn of thread has been accounted for. And that includes the fate of Louis Bernard himself." Dr. Fournier's brow furrowed. "I am no detective, Monsieur Poirot, but I admire your meticulousness." "Then let us proceed," Poirot said, gesturing toward the tapestry. With a careful hand, he drew aside the lower hem to reveal the delicate silver-inked map beneath. The lines traced a rugged coastline, veins of rivers, and the subtle outline of a Roman vicus nestled between rolling hills. "Magnificent," Dr. Fournier breathed. "The site is unmistakable, the ancient settlement of Juliobona, lost for centuries beneath Norman soil." Inspector Dupont produced a small crystal vial containing metallic dust. "Monsieur Poirot, the final analysis on this sample, collected from the gardener's shed, confirms it matches exactly the preservation mordant on the tapestry's reverse." Poirot nodded. "And thus we know the intruder had direct access to both the tapestry's concealed map and the restoration workshop. Yet motive and method alone do not complete the picture. We must revisit the very moment when Louis Bernard lost his life." He turned to Hastings. "Recall, Hastings, how Bernard was found slumped against the tapestry, the broken pane at his feet." Hastings inclined his head. "The coroner concluded he died of a depressed skull fracture, inconsistent with a blow from a hand but consistent with a fall onto glass." "Precisely," Poirot said. "But why did Bernard himself shatter the pane?" "He believed a robbery was underway. He thought the shattered glass was evidence of a violent break-in, not the slit scored by Madame Moreau's blade." Dr. Fournier interjected, "He must have come back into the gallery after the intruder fled, to investigate." In his shock, he leaned against the pane's frame, slipped, and struck his head. Poirot inclined his head. A tragic irony. The one intent on preserving the tapestry fell victim to his own caution. "But now, Doctor, I ask you to confirm, have you located the site marked here, halfway along the river, near the ancient ford?" The archaeologist nodded, eyes bright with excitement. "Yes, this morning, in fact. We found pottery shards, foundation stones, all matching the map's coordinates. Tomorrow, an excavation commences." "Marvelous," Poirot murmured. "Louis' discovery lives on. Yet let us not forget those shadows that linger here." He turned to Inspector Dupont. "Inspector, please call Madame Moreau, Clémence Renault, and Monsieur Legendre." Within moments, all three were ushered back into the salon. Madame Moreau, slender and composed, gave Clémence a slight nod. Clémence's eyes brimmed with curiosity. Legendre's face remained inscrutable. Poirot addressed them in measured tones. "Miss Amis, you have each played a part in the events leading to Louis Bernard's death. Yet only one of you bore direct guilt in his final misstep. You know, Madame Moreau, that your intrusion, driven by desperation, set in motion the events that frightened Louis into returning alone, thereby precipitating his fatal fall. Simone Moreau's shoulders sagged. I never meant to frighten him so. I only wished to secure what I believed was rightfully mine. Clémence folded her hands. And I never meant to trespass, merely to honor him with my art. Legendre cleared his throat. I did not trespass at all, I merely visited to confirm the tapestry's provenance for the state archives. Poirot raised a hand to forestall further protest. Your motives differ, but your methods converged. Each of you held a key, literal or figurative, to the locked room, Madame Moreau, with her financial distress and pearl clasp, Clémence, with her indigo thread, Legendre, with his metallic dust. All three of you passed through that service corridor, manipulated the tapestry, and departed with your own marks left behind. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. Yet only one act proved fatal, the slit in the glass pane, which Madame Moreau executed with her fine blade. Had the pane been snapped violently, Bernard might have recognized a robber's clumsiness. But a clean cut suggested careful planning, enough to alarm him without offering recourse. He returned alone, believing a thief still lurked, and in that alarmed state, he struck his head fatally. Simone Moreau gasped. But I did not intend to hurt Louis. I wanted only the map. Intent is not the issue, Poirot said gently. Your act, madam, set the stage for his death. Without your blade slit, he would not have returned. Without your panic, he would not have fallen. You bear responsibility for the cascade of events. He turned now to the others. Mademoiselle Renault and Monsieur Legendre, your breaches of trust compounded the situation, but you did not fracture the pane. Legendre nodded solemnly. I understand. Clémence's voice trembled. Monsieur Poirot, what becomes of me now? Your trespass will be noted, Poirot replied, but your motive was homage, not greed. I believe the court will show leniency. He smiled kindly. Your art will continue to honor Louis Bernard's memory. Poirot shifted his gaze back to Madame Moreau. And you, madam, must answer for your actions before the magistrate once more. He paused, then spoke with warmth, yet do not despair. Louis's dream lives on in that map, now destined to guide scholars to ancient ruins. Your repentance and your service at the Louvre may yet redeem you in the eyes of history. Simone Moreau bowed her head, tears falling silently. Poirot stepped forward. Now, let us witness the transfer of Le Songe de la Nuit to the Louvre. There, its threads will be protected, its map interpreted, and Louis Bernard's legacy secured. Today, justice is served, tomorrow, discovery begins. Epilogue. As the tapestry was carefully rolled and crated for its journey to the Musée du Louvre, Poirot and Hastings stood together in the courtyard. Clémence Renault and Inspector Dupont joined them, while Madame Moreau watched from the gallery steps, a solemn figure transformed by remorse. Hastings clapped Poirot on the shoulder. Another case closed, but this one feels different. We've saved not only a life's work, but also, in a way, a soul." Poirot smiled, mustache twitching with satisfaction. "Yes, Hastings. In unraveling the threads of deceit, we ensure that the tapestry's true design, Louis Bernard's vision of the past, shines forth undimmed. And in that, we serve the twin masters of justice and knowledge." The carriage wheels clattered on cobblestones as Le Songe de la Nuit departed for its new home, leaving behind a gallery reclaimed by light and the certainty that, however tangled the threads of human motive, the little grey cells would always find the pattern at its heart. Chapter 8. Justice and Resolution. A soft spring rain pattered against the tall windows of the Galerie de la Lune as dawn broke over Montmartre. Inside, the gas lamps were still lit, casting a warm glow upon Le Songe de la Nuit's gleaming silver threads. Today was the day the gallery would reopen, no longer merely a space of commerce and display, but a living memorial to Louis Bernard's dedication and sacrifice. Hercule Poirot stood at the foot of the tapestry, his posture regal, his expression serene. Beside him, Captain Hastings and Inspector Dupont arranged the final details of the ceremony. At 10 o'clock precisely, Isabelle Bernard emerged from her private chambers. Wearing a simple black dress trimmed in grey, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Though grief still shadowed her pale face, her eyes shone with hope. In her hands she bore a laurel wreath of white lilies, a symbol of purity and remembrance. She laid it reverently at the base of the tapestry's glass case, her lips whispering a final, private farewell to her brother. Poirot cleared his throat gently, and the gathered guests, a small circle of scholars, friends of the Bernards, and a few sympathetic journalists, fell silent. Clémence Renault, resplendent in a dove-grey suit, stood beside Dr. Marcel Fournier, now back from the excitement of the Normandy dig. Madame Simone Moreau watched from near the entrance, her posture humble yet composed. Hastings, in a neatly pressed suit, waited dutifully beside Inspector Dupont. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot began, his voice measured and clear, "we come together on this spring morning not in tribute to misfortune, but in celebration of a man whose passion for art, and for truth, transcended even death. Louis Bernard's final discovery, woven into this tapestry, has guided us to the lost vicus of Juliobona. It has also restored his own good name, imperiled by misunderstanding and greed." A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience. Clémence dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief embroidered in indigo, the color of her own paint. Dr. Fournier nodded gravely, recalling the dusty shards and broken shards of roof tile unearthed at the excavation site. Madame Moreau's lashes glistened with remorse, but she held her chin high, honoring her pledge of atonement. Poirot continued, "Thanks to Madame Bernard's courage in the face of sorrow, to Inspector Dupont's tireless diligence, to Captain Hastings's unwavering support, and even, dare I say, to the contrition of Simone Moreau and the devotion of Clémence Renault, we have seen justice served and scholarship advanced. Today, Le Songe de la Nuit is protected not behind locked doors but under the guardianship of the Seine's own museum, where Louis's map will guide future generations." He stepped aside as Inspector Dupont approached with a gilded plaque. Together they affixed it to the wall beside the tapestry's glass case. In memory of Louis Bernard, 1892–1934. Art dealer, archaeological enthusiast, seeker of truth. May his discovery light the path of knowledge for generations to come. Isabelle Bernard placed a single white rose at the wreath's center, her hand trembling only slightly. The assembled guests joined in a moment of hushed reflection, the weight of their shared experience binding them in silent solidarity. When the plaque was unveiled, Dr. Fournier stepped forward. "Permit me, Madame Bernard, to speak of Louis's greatest legacy." He gestured to the tapestry. "Within these threads lies a map of not simply stones and roads, but of human endeavor. Our team in Normandy has already uncovered a series of villas, a temple ruin, and evidence of daily life, all guided by Louis's vision. We shall continue to excavate, document, and share our findings with the world, honoring both history and the man who revealed it." Polite applause followed, and Clémence approached the front to present her own offering, a delicate watercolor depicting the tapestry's hidden map overlaid on a modern topographical chart. "In memory of Louis Bernard," she said, her voice soft but steady. "May his spirit live on in art and discovery." She hung the painting beside the plaque, its indigo pigments glowing beneath the lamps. At last, Poirot raised his hands for silence. "And now," he declared with a gentle smile, "let us proceed to a modest reception in the salon's adjoining room. There, refreshments await, and conversations may flow as freely as the Seine itself." He inclined his head toward the gallery's richly carved double doors, which swung inward to reveal a banquet table adorned with fresh pastries, fruit, and fine teas. Isabelle offered her arm to Clémence, and together they moved toward the doorway, Simone Moreau following with measured steps. Hastings and Dupont flanked Poirot as he brought up the rear, his keen gaze lingering on the tapestry's silver threads. He seemed to imagine Louis's steady hand and hopeful heart woven into each stitch. Once the salon filled with soft chatter and the clink of teacups, Poirot allowed himself a moment of private reflection. He turned to Hastings, who stood beside him with a knowing smile. "Mon ami," Poirot said quietly, "we have seen justice not simply in conviction, but in reconciliation. We have seen a sister's love upheld, a prodigal patron forgiven, an artist's devotion honored, and the preservation of knowledge above all." Hastings nodded, raising a glass of chamomile tea in a silent toast. "To Louis Bernard, and to the little grey cells that guide us always." Outside, the rain had ceased, and sunlight pierced the clouds, casting a rainbow across the slate rooftops of Montmartre. Within the Galerie de la Lune, laughter and music filled the rooms once more, the tapestry's silver glow a reminder of the mysteries that lay hidden in plain sight, ready to be unveiled by those with the curiosity, courage, and compassion to seek the truth. And so, in the heart of Paris, the final chapter of this nocturnal tale came to rest in the light of day, its threads woven together into a story of redemption, discovery, and the unbreakable bonds of justice.